So think about this for a minute, the neighborhood in which you live. Because raise your hand if you, your family, or those, your friends closest to you, have been shot by a bullet or stabbed by a knife in their torso or their neck. Raise your hand. I see like one or two people here, which is, tragic that you have that happen. But now let's compare that to how many people in your family, your close personal friends, who had a diagnosis of cancer, heart attack, stroke, dementia, diabetes, then raise your hand. Right? And you see like everybody's hand goes up. And my response to that is, you want to live in that neighborhood where you know that the risks are so great that the inevitable consequence is you're going to have what happens to you is the same thing what happens to other Americans. Why would you want to live in such a dangerous neighborhood just waiting to have a tragedy befall you when it doesn't have to happen? The normal lifespan for humans is between 97 and 107 years old without the need for getting cancer, heart disease, diabetes, amputation, blindness, kidney failure, heart attacks. You don't have to be suffering and be tortured in hospitals. We have control of our health destiny. And I'm hoping, as a result of today, you'll understand these concepts and be able to take control of your life. And with doing that, you become the health hero. You get the superpowers to not just control your life, but to be the role model that can have a good influence on other people's lives. We don't need the superpowers to bend steel or fly through the air. We have the population having suffering and tragedies, suffering with autoimmune disease and kidney transplants and lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and ulcerative colitis and connective tissue disease and chronic headaches. And we have all these diseases that affect us that are the result of really health ignorance in the population in the modern world. Because the nutritional science community has shown tremendous amount of information to put the power back in your hands so you can take control and have a happy and healthy life and be in total control of that. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to start with the fact that food gives us nutrients. Two types of nutrients, macro and micro. So macronutrients contain calories, fat, carbohydrate, and protein. And the first thing I'm telling you right now is the more macronutrients, the more calories you eat in life, the shorter your lifespan. So you control your lifespan and how fast you age by the amount of calories you consume. More calories, you age faster. Less calories, you age slower. Of course, food also gives us micronutrients. Micronutrients don't contain calories. They're things like vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, antioxidants. And the problem with the American diet is people's foods they're choosing to put in their body don't contain an adequate micronutrient load. The American population and most of the modern world is ubiquitously micronutrient deficient. The reason they're micronutrient deficient is because they eat 60% of their calories from processed foods like pasta, bread, white rice, salad oils, mayonnaise, donuts, cookies, crackers, rice cakes, breakfast bars, chips, soda, French fries, white bread, commercial baked goods. They eat foods that are just sources of macronutrients with no significant micronutrient load that's been processed out. And as you take in substances with no micronutrients, with just macronutrients, the body utilizes cofactors, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. It becomes deficient, more and more deficient in nutrients, and then you build up more metabolic waste products, like free radicals and advanced glycation end products. So we build up more toxins, more poisons in our body, the more we become deficient in micronutrients. And then Americans eat about 30% of their diet from animal products, like meat and chicken and eggs and dairy. And animal products are also very calorically rich, but they don't contain most important micronutrients, like the phytochemicals and antioxidants that enables the immune system to fight off inflammation and to protect against cancer and the endothelial inflammation that causes heart disease. So we're eating, in this country, we're only eating about 10% of calories from produce, but only 2% of calories from vegetables. So most of the produce consumed is potatoes and ketchup, or things with relatively low nutrient counts like rice. But the actual colorful vegetables are less than 2% of the American population. And what nutritional science has taught us over the last few decades is that humans are vegetable-dependent animals. We need a high vegetable intake to have a heightened lifespan. So I'm going to go over right now this foundational principle of a nutritarian diet. I call the dietary portfolio I recommend a nutritarian diet to represent a diet that contains adequate amount of nutrients humans require to maximize human immune function and to allow normal longevity. Now, I want you to memorize these 5 words, because these 5 words are the most proven methodology, or I should say, the only proven methodology in science to slow aging and to extend human lifespan are these 5 words which I want you to write down or memorize. It's moderate caloric restriction in the context of micronutrient excellence, or moderate caloric restriction with micronutrient excellence. You've got that, right? That's represented by this health equation, H equals N over C, which means your healthy life expectancy and how long you live is proportional to the micronutrient bang per caloric buck that you consume through your life. How many micronutrients did you get per calorie that you ate? Because when you get micronutrient fulfillment and you get an adequate amount of antioxidants and phytochemicals and vitamins and minerals, it naturally diminishes your caloric requirement. And you desire an appropriate amount of calories. You desire an appropriate amount, not an excess amount, when you meet your micronutrient needs with healthy food. But the more you pour oil on your food, and the more you eat white flour and other low nutrient foods, the more you dilute the nutrient density of your diet, increase the requirement for micronutrients, and the body responds by increasing its apostat and its appetite and makes people into calorie-consuming monsters. They can't stop desiring more calories because they didn't get sufficient micronutrients in the consumption of the calories they chose. You following that so far? Now, I'm saying something also quite different here. Because don't most people think it's favorable to raise the metabolic rate so you can eat more food and not get too heavy? Isn't that what most people think? Because I'm saying that one way we control our lifespan is by controlling our metabolic rate. Because the higher your metabolic rate, the faster you're aging, and the slower your metabolic rate, the slower you're aging. So let me give you an example here. I'll just use my own body as an example. Here I am, and I weigh about 150 pounds. Let's just say my basal metabolic needs are about 1,500 calories a day without exercise. Now, what if I ate an extra 200 calories a day that I didn't need? 200 calories a day over my basal metabolic needs. So I ate 1,700 calories a day. Now, each pound of body fat is about 3,500 calories. There's about 350 days in the year, whatever it is, close enough, right? So for every extra 100 calories a day, I would put on 10 pounds, right? So if I ate 200 calories a day extra that I didn't need at the end of the year, instead of weighing 150, I'd weigh 170, right? It doesn't work that way. It's not right. I'll tell you why. Because the body knows that moving from its set point weight, moving from its ideal weight with low body fat is so dangerous to its survival that the body will try to burn the extra calories off and not turn it into fat. It'll try to raise its metabolism in response to the excess calories. So it doesn't gain 20 pounds in the year, it only will gain 10 pounds, not 20 pounds. The body will attempt to speed up its metabolic rate by raising body temperature, by increasing respiratory quotient to calories burned through breathing, and by raising its thyroid function. So it'll make an effort to try to speed up its metabolism. But I just made this pact with the devil because I sped up my metabolism, so I'm just taking years off my life. I'm going to take away my stem cells and my telomeres, the ability to age slow. So I'm going to biologically now age faster from the extra calories I consumed, so I only put 10 pounds, not 20 pounds. For example, a person who's 20 or 30 pounds overweight, they didn't eat an extra 20 or 30 pounds of food that turned into fat. They ate an extra 60 to 100 pounds of extra food they didn't eat. In other words, what I'm saying right now is that your body, if you're overweight, you just need a little extra calories. You ate way extra calories that you didn't eat. You're not even close. You're not even in the ballpark of the amount of calories you need. Not even close to it. And everybody in America is, for example, I say to people, we live on half of what we eat. So half of what we eat meets our needs. And the other half meets the needs of our doctors. You get that? And it sounds like a joke, but it's pretty accurate because in America we consume over 3,000 calories a day on the average person, yet the average person in rural China only consumes about 1,500 calories a day. We are consuming almost double the amount of calories humans need in this country. And that's why we have everybody's overweight. And I say almost everybody's overweight because let's look at the data. Because the US government and the health authorities tell us that 77% of people are overweight or obese. Well, that's not true. The reason they say 77%, because they use BMI of 25 as the demarcation line between normal weight and overweight. All long-lived societies have BMIs below 23, and the longest-lived people, centenarians, have BMIs below 22 for a male, below 21 for a female. If we permissively use the 23 as the demarcation line, a BMI of 23, that labels 89% of Americans as being overweight, about 90%, not 77%. Now let's look at that 10% of Americans that are not overweight with the BMIs below 23. Well, the majority of those are of a normal weight because they smoke cigarettes, they're alcoholics, they have medical conditions, or they have autoimmune diseases or depression, and most of them are smokers. The majority of people in the normal weight category have some medical condition that keeps them a normal weight. If they were healthy, they'd be overweight like everybody else eating American food. Did you follow that? It's only 2.4% of Americans, when studied, that have a favorable BMI below 23, which is not that favorable anyway, it should be below 22, but anyway, it's only 2.4% have BMIs below 23 because they earned it through eating right and exercising regularly. A very small percent. Maybe more in California here, I don't know. And I'm also saying that there's no such thing as a healthy overweight person. That's a misnomer. Fat on the body creates disease and ages you rapidly. When you're fat, when you have extra body fat, you're insulin resistant. Fat makes you insulin resistant. And then the beta cells in the pancreas produce more insulin. And with higher levels of insulin being circulated to push your glucose down in the favorable range, there's no sign of diabetes yet because the excess insulin is keeping your sugar in the favorable range. But even while your blood sugar is favorable, the extra insulin, the primary fat storage hormone, ages you rapidly, creates chronic inflammation, and allows cells to replicate, including cancer cells. It's a primary factor driving cancer in your future. So I'm saying that all overweight people are pre-diabetic, not just ones whose sugars start to sneak up, because eventually the beta cells, having to work that hard, pushing so much insulin, start to poop out, and they can't produce 5 times as much insulin as a normal person would need at normal body weight. They will produce twice as much insulin as a normal person might need. But the twice enough insulin isn't enough to keep the sugars down, and the sugars start to creep up, and the person gets diagnosed first with prediabetes and then eventually with diabetes. But the prediabetes didn't happen when the sugars started to rise. It happened years before, just when they were overweight from the high circulating insulin. And the high level of body fat doesn't just make you insulin resistant, it also activates the aromatase system, which raises estrogen. And when you mix raised estrogen with raised insulin, then you have the formula for breast and prostate cancer. And then it doesn't just raise insulin and raise hormones. Fat cells also are pro-inflammatory because they have a poor blood supply. So they spew out reactive oxygen species, cytokines, lipokines, and immune suppressive substances that prevent the immune system from having what scientists call immune surveillance. The immune system loses the ability to surveil and check all the neighborhoods to make sure there's nothing going wrong where it can't remove a cell or create, or before it becomes damaging or becomes precancerous. And it stops what scientists call gene silencing. Gene silencing means the body has the ability to look for gene defects and either fix a defect or silence a defect, not allowing it to be expressed so it can't cause damage to the body. But it can't gene silence and it can't immunosurveillance unless two things are present. Number one, you have to have adequate micronutrients, especially the nutrients contained in green vegetables. It's called the NRF2 transcription proteins that activate the ARE, which is the antioxidant response element in the cell, to surveil and fix the DNA. You don't have to know those things right now. But you do have to know that exposure to green vegetables is so important to activate that mechanism that protects cellular machinery. And that if you don't like green vegetables, of course, you could try to live close to a hospital, but that won't help you very much anyway. Because I love to go skiing, and I was noticing that all these condos and expensive homes right on the ski slopes, people like to live really close to the ski slopes where they like to ski, but I'm just thinking they should put up like nice condos and with zip lines or like chair lifts right into the hospital emergency rooms, take you right into the hospital, back to your condo again, if you decide to eat like Americans eat, live the American diet. It's just, anyway. More of my stupid jokes. But smiling makes you live longer anyway, even if the joke is stupid. It's like, it's okay. I have to raise my hand and say, that's a joke, by the way. All right, so let's review what we went over so far. We went over that lower calorie, high nutrient intake prolongs lifespan. It enhances cellular repair. It reduces inflammation. It suppresses genetic alterations that could cause cancer or cause damage. It decreases free radicals, and the primary toxins that age us are the type of free radical that's called reactive oxygen species, or ROS, and AGEs, which stand for advanced glycation end products. Those are primary toxins that age us. Kind of funny that AGEs spells ages us, ages, right? The primary toxin are these AGEs. And that eating appropriately the healthy food and the right amount of healthy food slows the metabolic rate, because how much calories and enhance it? How many calories should you eat? How much should you eat? As much as possible or as little as possible? Well, you should, to maximize lifespan. Here's the answer. You're not going to like it. The answer is you should eat as little as possible without becoming too thin. So that means, what's too thin? And by the way, I'm going to be very specific here, because I told you BMI of 22 for a male and below 21 for a female. But I'm saying that we start to see inflammation rises in the ability of the blood to clot, and endothelial inflammation and insulin resistance starts to go up as soon as a man's body fat gets above 15%, or a female's body fat gets above 25%. So that's the numbers. You can go on one of those electronic scales and see your body fat measurement. And if your body fat's above 25% for a female, you're in a danger zone. And if your body fat's above 15%, you're a male, you're in a danger zone. And because everybody around you and everybody you know is grossly overeating, it's just normal to grossly overeat with them. You've lost your connection to hunger. Most Americans never felt hunger. They don't know what hunger feels like. They think hunger is feeling ill, like fatigue or shakiness or headache or stomach fluttering or cramping. Those aren't symptoms of hunger. Those are symptoms of being a food addict. Those are withdrawal symptoms from chronic overeating, from having too high of a caloric rush that stimulate and cause damage to your digestive tract and your brain. You can't get so many calories in your bloodstream at one time if you're eating natural foods like onions and mushrooms and berries and seeds and nuts. You have to eat oil and sugar and honey and white flour and what you can't get. This caloric rush that goes into the bloodstream from eating processed foods affects the same dopamine centers in the brain that are affected by opiates. And you become acclimated to and dependent on excess calories Because if you don't, because you're so used to putting oil and getting these foods that flood the brain, flood the bloodstream with high amounts of calories, that you feel empty if you don't constantly overeat calories. So an apple doesn't satisfy you. An apple or a peach isn't sufficient for dessert. You'd have to have something like peach pie with sugar on it or ice cream. You have to have something more calorically dense. So I'm saying here that for every 100-calorie increase in metabolic rate, because you're controlling your metabolism, you increase the risk of death by 25%. Studies show that, for example, in the normal range of thyroid, of your free T4, there's almost double the heart attacks. In the higher half of normal, that means almost half the heart attacks. In the lower range of normal, and of course lower rates of atrial fibrillation, irregular heartbeat, when you're in the lower half of the normal range, not the higher half. What we're driving up increased thyroid function, increased body temperature, and increased utilization of calories just by all the excessive calories we're eating and that we don't need. Now, vegetables, on the other hand, are the key factors that enable protection of the DNA. Because we now have the ability to measure methylation, the accumulation of methylation defects in the DNA, and as methylation defects accumulate, your body moves towards a healthy to a precancerous condition to eventually a gray area that's hard to discern whether it's in the normal or cancer range till a definitive cancer exposure starts to occur, right? We know that populations with low green vegetable intake have higher rates of cancer, and populations with high green vegetable intake have low rates of cancer. For example, in the Fiji Island study, now, by the way, the Fiji Islanders smoke a lot of cigarettes there, but they have very low rates of lung cancer, even though they smoke a lot, because they eat a lot of green vegetables. And they compared them in that study to Hawaiian Islanders who don't generally smoke, but don't have a high green vegetable intake, and have more higher lung cancer per capita than they do in Fiji where they smoke. Pretty interesting, right? There's other studies like that. There's also studies like the Catawba Island study, which showed that in the population, there's no high blood pressure in the elderly population and no history of heart disease among the population at present or in their ancestors, because they're not yet connected with commercial foods and salted foods and fried foods and using oils. They just eat what's naturally produced on the island. They're more isolated. Just like the isolated Amazon tribes, like the Como-Nino Indians in the Amazon, who don't salt their food and haven't connected with commercial civilization. They're kind of isolated, eating natural substances, like they're shipwrecked on Gilligan's Island. But because they don't salt their food, you see that the blood pressure levels of children are the same as teenagers. In this country, teenagers have higher blood pressure than toddlers do. And then the blood pressure of toddlers and teenagers are the same as adults and the elderly. We see it's unnatural for the blood pressure to rise as people age, and adults and the elderly have the same blood pressure as children and toddlers. It's kind of amazing. Because now we think it's normal consequence of aging that your blood pressure gets higher and higher as you get older and older, because by the time you're 65, by the time we're 70, almost 90% of the population is taking drugs to lower the blood pressure. Crazy, right? So we're unearthing these factors that recognize that heart disease is a result of the neighborhood you're living in, and you're mimicking and copying patterns of eating and living that your neighbors are doing. And if you do that, you're going to develop these diseases that are affected by your food choices. And the change you have to make isn't a small change. It's a radical change. Because we're eating a diet that's radically dangerous. It's radically dangerous, the diet we're eating in the modern world. So, raw vegetables and cancer, remember those 5 words I told you to memorize? What were those 5 words I told you to memorize? Right. Moderate caloric restriction in the context of micronutrient excellence. And how do you get yourself to feel comfortable desiring less calories? How do I have you desire the right amount of calories so you don't feel like eating more, so you feel satisfied with less calories? How do you do that? What do you think? you have to eat more high nutrient foods that have a lot of volume and nutrients in them, but of lower calories. You have to eat a lot of foods that have a high H/C ratio. You have to eat more nutrient-powerful foods. And the 6 foods that are most powerfully linked to lower rates of cancer and longevity, let's just give 6 foods that have a lot of scientific support. And if you put them in a dietary portfolio, you have radical, absolutely radical low rates of cancer rates. Like even one of those foods, like flax seeds or chia seeds in a diet, lower rates of breast cancer by 71%. Breast cancer death by 71% in one study. Just the consumption of onions lowered risk of certain cancers by 88%. Just the onions alone. Just using mushrooms in a diet, lower rates of breast cancer by 64%. But you mix mushrooms and greens and you lower rate of breast cancer by 89%. We're talking about radically changing the risk of cancers and extending human lifespan. And those 6 foods are called, I call G-bombs. Let's review those foods one time, okay, so we can memorize them. Greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds, like flax seeds, chia seeds, sesame seeds. Greens, beans. But here I'm saying raw vegetables and cancer, and I want you to memorize this line. Here's what I want you to memorize. This is the line. Raw vegetables have the most powerful and consistent association with the reduction of cancers of all types. Can you memorize that? How about you say it right now? Raw vegetables, with me, raw vegetables have the most consistent and powerful association with the reduction of cancers of all types. Can you guys talk or you lost your voices too? Maybe all that junk food you've been eating. Because I'm saying here that we're a vegetable-dependent animal, and so this leads to the obvious question is, are you guys eating at least one large salad a day with lettuce and arugula and kale and bok choy and red onion and scallion, and are you eating, with a dressing made of like nuts and seeds and, so are you eating at least one serving of big salad a day? Raise your hand. Okay, good, because we're a raw vegetable-dependent animal. We can't have optimal health without consuming. That's my mantra. The mantra is, the salad is the main dish. One meal a day, at least have a salad as the main dish. Have a big salad. And chop it up so you can fit it into a bowl, not this little soup-sized bowl, a serving bowl. Eat a lot of raw vegetables and a lot of variety of raw vegetables. Because vegetables don't just protect against cancer, they protect against heart disease. The meta-analysis of all these studies show that the more vegetable portions a day you eat, the reduced intravascular inflammation, it restores and maintains vascular elasticity and protects against heart attacks and strokes. It's not one diet for strokes and another diet for cancer, another diet to protect against dementia, another diet to protect. It's the same foods that protect against all these diseases that are afflicting Americans. So if I asked you guys, what's the food most powerfully associated with low rates of heart attacks, what would the answer be? The answer would be, I hope that's what you said, it would be green vegetables. And by the way, lettuce is a superfood. Lettuce is very low in oxalic acid, means its calcium is all readily absorbable. It's the nature's richest source of sulfoquinavose, which fuel the growth of the healthy bacteria in the gut, which create that thickened biofilm over the villi, preventing the excursion of glucose into the bloodstream. Lettuce is a superfood. Okay, so they got that right. I think they said green vegetables, didn't they? So now I asked them, what's the food that have this, offer the most protection against heart attacks? And what I said to them, now what about you guys? What's the food that has the most protection against cancer? Not against heart disease, but cancer. What is that food? Green vegetables, the same food. Don't forget, if I ask you a question, the answer is always green vegetables, pretty much. Like, for example, what do gorillas mostly eat? Green vegetables, yeah, of course. Primates can't survive without green vegetables. We're primates. We're only like a 20th of a chromosome different from a mountain gorilla. Now, what about nuts and seeds? Because a nutritarian diet is very unique. Because Americans get most of their fat in their diet from animal products and oils. Like they pour oil over their food to get fat. A nutritarian diet doesn't use animal fats and oils. It gets its fat from eating nuts and seeds instead of using oils. You can't use both. If you took nuts and seeds and fats, you'd be too fat, obviously. You get too much calories. So what do you think shows dramatic effects at extending human lifespan and preventing heart attacks and cancers? Getting your fat from oils or animal fats or from nuts or seeds? Which is the best source of getting it? Would walnut oil be better than a walnut? Would sesame seed oil be better than sesame seeds? Would olive oil be better than an olive? Do you think the processed version is better than the whole food when the whole food contains fibers and phytochemicals and that are bound to the fibers and the proteins bound to the fibers? What I'm saying to you, it's insane that people think olive oil is a health food. I'm saying oil is a major contributor to breast cancer. How can I make such a radical, stupid statement? How can I say olive oil causes breast cancer? How can I? Well, because breast cancer is linked to your body fat level. And if you're pouring 3 tablespoons of oil on your food a day, that's 360 calories of fat you poured into your meals. It goes from the lips to the hips in 5 minutes flat. Instead of having 360 calories from oil, which made you get fat, instead of that, if you blended some nuts and seeds in the dressing, and let's say you used 150 calories or even 200 calories of nuts and seeds compared to 300 calories of oil. It's not the calories, because when nuts and seeds come into your bloodstream, because the sterols and stanols and fibers bind the fat so tightly, they carry some of that fat out into the toilet bowl. So the fact that you were satiated by your appetite went away, but the calories are absorbed so slowly over hours, not over minutes, that the body can preferentially burn it for energy and not feel like eating for the next 4 or 5 hours. Whereas oil is an appetite stimulant, which is digested rapidly and revs up fat storage hormone because of the caloric rush into the bloodstream. Like I could set up a buffet at the front of the room, and I could give you guys a tablespoon of olive oil to eat on your way to the buffet. You wouldn't eat less at the buffet. The 120 calories of a tablespoon of olive oil wouldn't have decreased your portion of sizes on the buffet by 120 calories. But if I gave you an apple to eat on the way to the buffet, a 65-calorie apple, you would eat 65 calories less food in the buffet because the space, the occupying, and the nutrients and the fiber in the apple would get your nerves could feel that and not be absorbed so rapidly. But if I mixed the oil in the food at the buffet, and you just said, well, you probably get the same amount of calories as the people who had the oil, right? Because they're getting the oil mixed in the food. No, because oil is an appetite stimulant, like salt. Sugar, oil, and salt are appetite stimulants. They light up the brain and turn you into a food addict and make you consume excess calories. The oil you're putting in your diet isn't benign. It dilutes the protein content of your diet, which we'll talk about later. It dilutes the nutrient content of your diet. It's highly addictive. It increases the appestat and the appetite and makes you overeat, and it makes you get fat. And you're looking to, if you're overweight, you're looking to take calories out of your diet, not to add poor calories on top of it. What are you going to take out of your diet if you used to take things away? You're going to take out foods that have nutrients in them, or you're going to take out foods that are just empty calories, that don't put any nutrients in your diet? It's so ridiculously crazy that people are able to be brainwashed with nonsense just because everybody's doing it and you're told it over and over again. Or what about the Mediterranean diet? They pour oil over their food. They have all these rationalizations that don't make any sense, that are not supported by science. The science supports that every study ever done, when people get their fat and they eat nuts and seeds as the main source of fat in their diet, or an additional source of fat, they get reduction of cardiac deaths and cancer deaths. So let's look at a few studies. Here's 4 or 5 studies that showed that a dramatic reduction of all causes of death from people eating at least an ounce of nuts a day. But here's the Physicians' Health Study, which showed that a 60% reduction in sudden cardiac death for physicians eating more than an ounce of nuts a day. But when people actually switched from animal fats or oils into nuts and seeds, then you got dramatic reduction of cardiac deaths by more than 80%, not by 60%. By the way, nuts and seeds also bind cholesterol. Remember I told you they bind fat and they carry fat out into the toilet bowl so all the fat isn't absorbed? Remember I told you that? They actually suck fat out of the bloodstream into the digestive tract. And it sucks out the oxidized LDL. That's the bad actor causing heart attacks. So you have more oxidized LDL in the stool. But in any case, most of the studies show that having nuts and seeds every day overall reduces heart attack rate, cardiovascular mortality about 40%. The Seventh-day Adventist Health Study 1 and 2 showed the same thing. And so many different studies corroborate each other. Large studies looking at hard endpoints like death show the same thing. And in the Seventh-day Adventist Health Study 2 was such an important study. The reason that's such an important study is because the population being studied were generally not eating a standard American diet. They weren't people that smoked heavily or drank a lot of alcohol. They weren't people eating at McDonald's and eating a lot of fast food. The Seventh-day Adventists were healthier than the average American. They advocate better health habits and eating less animal products and more vegetables, so people who ate animal products were eating smaller amounts. Did you follow that? And there were less confounding variables like smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol. And most people, and they showed that even among that group, the lowest quintile of nut and seed consumption compared to the highest quintile, and the lowest quintile consuming less than half an ounce of nuts and seeds, the highest quintile more than an ounce and a half of nuts and seeds a day, that the difference between the lowest and the highest quintile was a 40% difference in cardiovascular deaths, comparing the highest quintile to the lowest quintile. Did you follow that? And that was in all cohorts, cohorts of men, females, males, Caucasian, Asian, and every cohort, including vegans and flexitarians and non-vegans and omnivores. In other words, in all cohorts, including vegans, the longest-lived people were those people eating nuts and seeds, and the flexitarians who ate some animal products with regular consumption of nuts and seeds lived longer than the vegans who did not eat nuts and seeds. Did you follow that? Demonstrating how critical it is and how beneficial it is to get our fat from a whole food, When you're eating whole foods and chewing these whole foods and mixing them with the bacteria in the mouth, and your brain gets satisfied with fewer calories, with the right amount of calories. We instinctually desire the right amount of calories. You can't become overweight. Very hard to become overweight eating natural foods. You don't see a lot of overweight deer and coyotes and squirrels and chipmunks running around in natural habitats. That's why I always say, with many years of scientific contemplation and research, I finally figured out that Skipper never really lived on that island. Did you guys get that joke or you didn't? Some of you. So here's the Prevamid study. It's a study comparing olive oil with nuts and seeds and a Mediterranean diet. And by the way, interestingly, it showed that people who were given extra virgin olive oil to take home with them in bottles and to try to use it every day had a 15% lower heart attack risk than people who did not use olive oil regularly, showing that probably they use more butter or animal fats or other more dangerous sources of fat. But olive oil did have beneficial effects compared to other sources of fat, but not compared to nuts and seeds because they got like a 60% drop in cardiovascular death. In other words, in the Prevamid study, the longest-lived cohort with the fewest cardiovascular deaths were the group that was eating nuts and seeds at baseline and were then randomized to the group that were told to eat nuts and seeds, not the group that was randomized to consume olive oil. There were groups that were eating olive oil at baseline, randomized to eat nuts and seeds. Groups that were eating nuts and seeds, randomized to eat olive oil. Groups that were eating olive oil, randomized to use olive oil. But the longest lifespan were people who were eating nuts and seeds at baseline, who were randomized and told to continue to eat nuts and seeds. Did you follow that? By far. Here's a couple of studies that I published. Here's one published in 2020 called Nuts and Seeds for Heart Disease Prevention in the International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention, reviewing the science with over 50 references showing how consuming nuts and seeds regularly reduces cardiac arrhythmia and atrial fibrillation and sudden cardiac death. Especially ALA, the alpha-linolenic acid you get from eating those high omega-3 nuts and seeds. What I'm saying here is that ALA protects the heart against atrial fibrillation and cardiac arrhythmias. ALA we primarily get from eating flax seeds, hemp seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts. Walnuts are the highest omega-3 nut. So when I'm making a salad dressing, like I'm making a Russian dressing, like a Russian fig dressing with garlicky tomato sauce with some almonds and black fig vinegar and making this delicious dressing, I'll put a little hemp seeds in or a little walnuts in with the almonds to give it a little bit of balance between a high omega-6 nut, between a high omega-3 nut. If I'm making like an orange cashew dressing or sesame dressing for my salad, like take a navel orange and blend it with some lemon and a blood orange vinegar and some cashews and some toasted sesame seeds. I'm going to whip it up in the blender to make a delicious dressing. I'll probably throw little hemp seeds in there just to add a little more ALA or omega-3. So whatever recipe I'm doing, I'll take a little bit out of the omega-6 nut out and put some of the omega-3 nut in. So I'm trying to balance my omega-6 nut to my omega-3 intake nuts. And the high omega-3 intake nuts are what? What are those again? Let's review them. The high omega-3 nuts are like hemp seeds, are high in protein, but also very high in omega-3, and they have very little flavor profile. So I can just add some hemp seeds in to substitute, and still use the cashews or the pecans or the pistachio nuts or the almonds, whatever it is I want to do, but just taking out some of that and putting some hemp seeds in, or of course some walnuts or flax or chia to get a little of the omega-3 higher. You following that? And there's, of course, another study where I published with more than 400 individuals following a nutritarian diet, showing that they resolved their blood pressure. Their blood pressure went back to normal, no longer requiring medication. As a matter of fact, at my retreat in San Diego, and people who are fully compliant with my nutritional recommendations, their type 2 diabetes goes away. So 75% of their type 2 diabetes is gone within the first 6 weeks, and 90% of people with type 2 diabetes make full recoveries within 6 months. But same thing with high blood pressure. Almost everybody that comes in is off their blood pressure medications within the first month, but certainly at least 75% by 6 weeks, and they're all off blood pressure medications, or most of them, more than 90% within 6 months. These diseases melt away when you eat healthfully. And of course, the people lose lots of weight. Remember I told you earlier that when you're overweight, it increases inflammation, it increases aromatase, which increases estrogen, it suppresses immune function, you don't have protection against pneumonia or COVID, it increases risk of cancer. I gave you all these things, and we increase inflammation with measurable inflammatory markers, measurable high insulin, measured increased clotability, HSCRP goes up, we have these markers of disease goes up, but as a person is losing weight, even before they've lost all their extra weight, just the fact that they're losing at a pretty good clip, these markers of danger start to go down and normalize while they're losing. But the minute they stop losing and they start regaining again, these inflammatory markers start to go up again. Even if they're at a more favorable weight, if they're going to eat and start to gain weight, you're going to see the markers start to go up. That's why people undergoing lap band or gastric bypass surgery, their diabetes mostly goes away in the first 6 weeks, just like for them. 75% of them their diabetes improves or goes away in the first 6 weeks. You don't need to have gastric bypass or lap band to do that. You just do it with healthy eating. Don't forget that losing weight temporarily and then gaining it back again has no beneficial effect on your lifespan or health. Matter of fact, it can make things worse. It's only benefit to losing weight if you keep it off for the rest of your life. So if you're a female that weighs 150 pounds, it'll be beneficial to your lifespan to get down to 120 pounds and stay there below 120 for the rest of your life. If you're a male that weighs 175 pounds, it'll be good to get down below 160 pounds and stay there for the rest of your life. That means you have to learn to incorporate a new way of living and eating that you maintain for the rest of your life. There's a lot of learning you have to do here. And you have to recognize that as we age, our metabolic rate naturally slows, and we need less calories as we get older. I love people who say, oh, like I broke my leg, or I sprained my foot, so I just gained 50 pounds. Well, if you can't be physically active, you're going to need less calories. Why don't you just cut back your calories? Why do you eat the same diet that you were eating before you got hurt? You know, you've got to become the expert in you. I'm not the expert in you. You're the expert in you. You've got to know how much you're supposed to eat to be the best version of you. You've got to know what to eat to be the best version of you. People get completely disconnected from the fact that they're in control of their own body and their own health and their own, right, and what they put in their mouth, because they're social animals and they fit into the environment and they do what everybody else is doing around them, and they feel uncomfortable or out of place if they're going to eat or act or behave or be different than everybody else, right? So you need that support, that connectivity. You need to develop the social connection and the ability to support each other in better habits and to be radically different than the way other people eat and live. Okay, so we're talking about this idea of being hormonally favorable, and we talked about insulin and IGF-1 and estrogen, remember? I didn't mention IGF-1, I don't think yet, but IGF-1 is the other hormone that, when elevated, promotes growth of the body. It's the primary growth hormone. But it also is very cancer-promoting and accelerates aging when you have higher levels of IGF-1. And the foods that raise IGF-1 the most are animal protein, foods that are rich in animal protein. So we have these two hormones working in tandem with each other. The raise in insulin from high glycemic carbohydrates like white rice and white bread, right, which cause a big shunt of sugar in the bloodstream. I'm saying white flour is a sugar equivalent when you're eating commercial baked goods, a bagel, a croissant, a pizza, a burger, a sandwich. It's not a food, it's a drug. It lights up the brain in the same areas that are lit up by opiates. And it makes you determined to be lit up again. So when you're walking in an airport and you're smelling the chocolate chip cookies and the bagel you think to yourself, oh, well, I don't have no food in my bag, there's nothing else to eat, I gotta have a bagel, I gotta have something. That's an example of a food addict. Because the food addict, subconsciously, didn't have to think about it, they put themselves in a position so they can rationalize why it's okay to eat a bagel. It's not a food, it's a drug. Which then because eating a sugar load in your bloodstream spiking up is self-destructive, just like you snorted cocaine. You might as well just, oh, I forgot my cocaine, left it home. Nothing to do here, I might as well just use their cocaine. But you see, if you weren't a food addict, you wouldn't have, because it was subconscious. They didn't purposely get themselves, but the subconscious mind gets addicted. The primitive brain is addicted, and subconsciously it comes up with these unique rationalizations and experiences to put you in a position where you think it's okay to eat, to self-destruct, eat things that are destructive to your own survival. And why would you consume something that's destructive to your own survival? Why would you eat things that cause diabetes, heart disease, cancer? Why? Because you become addicted, because you're addicts. You have to recognize this is an addictive substance, and the only way to remove the desire for addictive substance is enforced abstinence and not have those things for many months at a time so you no longer desire them. You have to stay away from cigarettes and alcohol if you're never going to desire it. You've got to stay away from white flour and white rice if you're not, and oils if you're not going to, and fried foods if you're not going to desire the caloric hit, the desire that rush it gives the brain. You don't even know you're an addict. You can't even feel it. You just want these things. You don't even know why you want them. I know what you're thinking. Because I know how many people, I know how the addictive mentality has invaded people's brains, like you become aliens. The aliens have taken over your brains. You're thinking, this sounds pretty good, pretty scientific, interesting, but it's not for me. I couldn't do that. It's for the person, maybe for somebody else, but I'm not going to do it. I can't change the way I'm doing things. Because the primitive brain is like upset right now. It's having its addictions toyed with and maybe trying to be taken away from you, and you're frantically trying to defend your ability to maintain your addictions. Am I right? I don't know. Be honest. Or silent. So look, these high glycemic carbohydrates we're talking about, and of course the high glycemic effect gets worse if you put oil in it. The rice with oil, or the French fries that are fried, or the burger or the pizza, you accelerate the glycemic load. So low glycemic load carbohydrates are things like beans and and jicama and carrots and peas. But of course, we're talking about high glycemic load foods lead to cancer, heart disease, dementia. And the insulin resistance, remember we talked about body fat making you more insulin resistant? But saturated fat from animal products, those fats impair the insulin receptor even worse, right? So this person on a keto diet with lots of animal products, they can't touch carbohydrates. They can't have oatmeal and a mango because their sugar will go through the roof because they're eating so much saturated fat, which distorted the function of their insulin receptors. I don't have time to go into all this information, but I wanted to show you that if we score carbohydrates on a hierarchical scale, we can track the amount of resistant starch and fiber. And beans are nature's richest source of slowly digestible carbohydrates that enter the bloodstream slowly so they don't require much insulin. If you have a metabolic hindrance to weight loss, if you're overweight, then your most favored carbohydrate, which is also rich in protein, should be beans. Navy beans, black beans, red kidney beans, Azuki beans, even lentils. So a healthy meal might be wok veggies like broccoli and cabbage and onions and mushrooms with lentils and beans, maybe with a Thai curry sauce, But in any case, we're saying that we score foods on a hierarchical scale, and we score beans, vegetables, and high carbohydrates on a hierarchical scale. And because the extra resistant starch and the extra fiber also does two other things. It fuels the growth of the good bacteria in the gut, which slow absorption of glucose from other foods that aren't beans, activate and stabilize the insulin receptors, supply a lot of protein in the body, but also the resistant starch is not all biologically accessible. All the calories are not utilized by the body. It can't be absorbed. The extra calories are fermented by bacteria in the gut. That's resistant starch, means that it's resistant to enzymatic degradation. It doesn't get absorbed. The calories pass through you and go into the toilet bowl. So it made you feel like you had a lot of calories. You feel satisfied, but all those calories never even fully come into the body. So it satiated you and made you feel like you had enough food, even though you didn't even absorb all of it. And because you're not absorbing the full carbohydrate content, it makes the actual amount of percent of absorbable protein even higher. So the protein content of beans, which is about 30%, actually turns out to be more like 40%, more than meat, because you actually don't absorb all the carbohydrate calories from it. Did you follow that? A little complicated. So we're saying here that lower levels of IGF-1, lower levels extend lifespan, and lower levels of insulin extend lifespan. When you overeat, you get higher levels of IGF-1 and higher levels of insulin when you overeat. But the foods that promote the highest level of IGF-1, that are most powerfully promoting cancer, are animal proteins and particularly dairy products, particularly milk. It has a lot of IGF-1 because it's highly growth promoting to make a cow triple its weight in the first few weeks of life. But in any case, plant proteins, and by the way, almost all whole plants like vegetables and beans and nuts and intact whole grains all have adequate protein in them. So a diet made of just those plants, the only whole plant food that is not rich in protein is fruit. If your diet is too high in fruit, you could be a little low in protein for the elderly or for the toddler. If your diet is not excessive in fruit and you're eating whole plants, you're getting enough protein. But if I take half my diet from the whole plants and I move it aside and pour oil on it for the other half of calories, I will just remove 50% of the protein in my diet by adding the oil. If I took a third of my diet from oil and put a third of my diet from sugar or honey or white flour, and instead of having the vegetables and the beans and the nuts and the grains, then I'm going to dilute all the protein out of my diet. Did you follow that? You have to really eat you have to eat the plants, not plant foods that are processed and greasy and fried and have no nutrients in them. So here's pooled data from studies showing IGF-1 linked to breast cancer. We can show the same thing, higher IGF-1 linked to prostate cancer, showing, of course, this slide, we're going through it rapidly now, I know, but it's the higher protein diet score, more animal protein in the diet leading to more cardiovascular deaths in a dose-dependent manner. And I brought up this study because there's more than 100,000 participants followed for more than 20 years, which means we have a high credence value study because the study includes large numbers of people. For many years they're followed. Number 3, they're looking at hard endpoints like death, not whether it raised your cholesterol or not whether it, long-term effects on their lifespan. And of course, we know that if you ask me the question, what's the most profound and surprising findings from the scientific literature over the last 5 years, it would be studies like this that show that most deaths, premature deaths, early life deaths, occur in keto people eating more higher levels of animal products with less carbohydrate. have the most early life deaths, and that more animal protein in the diet leads to dose-dependent deaths. But here's the kicker. More plant protein in the diet leads to more enhanced lifespan. Because you know what happened? Because studies over the years have shown people cut back on meat, it didn't make them live longer. And all these studies look at meat and lifespan, meat and cancer, meat and aging. Go search them. You don't see much effects. Because the people were lowering meat were eating more chicken and eggs. They're cutting back on meat, but they weren't cutting back all animal protein. They were just cutting back on meat and switching to other forces of animal products like chicken. Or they were eating meat and more bread, or eating meat and more, they were still eating a high glycemic carbohydrate. It wasn't controlled, so they were cutting back on animal products, instead eating more whole plants. And we talk about plant protein, it's the whole plants that we mentioned that have the most protein in them, that are vegetables, beans, nuts, and intact whole grains. So they actually eat real food, not fake food, to reduce the meat. Then we see dramatic enhanced lifespan. So don't forget, higher protein and lifespan has now been corroborated with 5 different studies from different researchers around the world with large numbers of people. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in each study, showing the same thing, that more animal protein, here's the 4 different studies from different researchers around the world, more animal protein, more death, more plant protein foods, longer lifespan. And out of the plant protein foods, what's the food that had the most association with the longest lifespan? A study on more than 100,000 Asians in China showed that when they ate more of this one food, we had the most people living to be past 100 years old. What do you think that one food was? Green vegetables, yeah, of course. What are you guys, stupid? So here's a review slide of what we'll learn. Number 1, we have these longevity proteins like SIRT1 and AMP kinase, which stabilize the DNA, prevent our telomeres from aging, stabilize our stem cells, these are anti-aging factors that slow lifespan and keep your body's immune system functioning into your later years. And those are stimulated. Those longevity proteins and those stem cell and telomere maintenance are enhanced by phytochemical exposure, phytochemicals present in colorful plants, regular exercise, and caloric restriction, moderate caloric restriction. We say moderate, not extreme caloric restriction. Being anorexic or being too thin isn't healthy either. You can do anything to an extreme. You can exercise to an extreme where you over-exercise too. But here we're talking about phytochemical exposure, exercise, and caloric restriction activates longevity proteins. And what accelerates mTOR, present in 100% of metastatic cancers, and what activates cell proliferation, cancer cell replication, suppresses immune function, ages the telomeres, destroys the stem cells, is more animal protein, excessive calories in general, and high glycemic carbohydrates like sugar, white rice, white bread, maple syrup, honey, and other high glycemic foods. So here's the study on 134 Chinese adults showing that green cruciferous vegetables were the most powerfully effective on longevity, and it had no threshold effect. The word threshold effect means that with mushrooms, for example, once you eat half a cup a day, having 2 cups is not better than half a cup. Just have your half a cup of mushrooms every day. Once you have half a cup of onions chopped up every day, having 2 cups of onions is not better than a half a cup. Once you have your tomato sauce every day, once you have your 2 tablespoons of seeds every day, your flax seeds or chia seeds, having 6 tablespoons is not better than 2 tablespoons. But not with green vegetables. There's no threshold. When they went from 1 cup to 2 cups to 3 cups to 4 cups, the people who had 4 cups did better than the people with 2 or 3 cups. There was no threshold. The more they ate, the longer they lived. Of green vegetables, particularly green cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and string, But we know that the green vegetables have these substances that fuel the growth of the immune system that surround the villi in the small intestines. It's these intraepithelial lymphocytes, right, that build up around your gut. This is a defender at the gates of the castle. You get atrophy of the villi and the immune system behind the villi when you don't have access to these green vegetable compounds. And you know what's really fascinating? You have an ergothionein receptor on your cells that stabilize the DNA from aging. An ergothionein receptor right on the cell wall. Amazing. Ergothionein comes from mushrooms. How the hell did you get a receptor on your cell wall that's for a compound found in mushrooms? I don't know how it got there. Must be that humans must have been eating mushrooms in their developmental stages for 50, 100,000 of years. Because we are dependent on these foods for normal or beneficial protection against disease and lifespan. So wrapping this up, what you've learned from me today, I hope,
is that a nutritarian diet has more beans in it, more greens in it, and more nuts and seeds than maybe other plant-based diets. It might be a macrobiotic diet based on rice, or a fruitarian diet, but there's more beans, more greens, and that means a dramatic lowering of the glycemic load, less gastric emptying, sustained amount of protein, satiation, satisfaction with less calories, more strength in your diet, and adequate protein even for the elderly or toddlers. And we're particularly conscious of not consuming toxins or poisons. Like, for example, do you guys know what a bivalve is? Bivalves are things that are like clams, oysters, scallops, and mussels. Those are the most dangerous foods because of agricultural runoff of more nitrogen dumping off the coastal waterways and in lakes. We have more production of cyanobacteria on algae bloom that are then eaten up, or by bottom feeders like shellfish and bivalves, creating a high intake. So we're developing more ALS and PDC, Parkinson Dementia Syndrome, or PDS. We're getting these serious diseases when people live near lakes or eating fish caught in coastal waterways. As of course, we dump thousands of tons every hour into the. See, it says lake fish cause ALS clusters around people living near freshwater lakes. And of course, shark fins, shark cartilage, super high in BMAA, in case you're wondering about that. I was talking to these sharks, and they said, no, we're not eating humans anymore. Too much toxins in those humans, too much plastics in those humans. Because the average human now has so much plastic in them from eating fish, because we put so much pollution and plastic dumping in the waterway that when you eat a sardine, I used to think sardines and oysters were okay, a little bit because they're small fish and don't concentrate toxic metals. But you eat the digestive tract of the sardine, which is coated with plastic now. So you're eating microplastic, and plastic causes cancer. So we've modified. We have to adjust. We have to make sure we're taking in adequate omega-3 fatty acids if we're not going to eat seafood because of the pollution of seafood. And so a nutritarian eats a variety of these natural plants. We don't use oil or animal products hardly ever. And then we're trying to eat at least half a cup of beans a day, but as much as you need. At least 3 fresh fruits a day, at least 1.5 ounces of nuts and seeds a day, at least 1 large salad every day, some steamed or wok greens every day, like broccoli and artichokes and asparagus and string beans and zucchini, and eating some mushrooms or onions every day. Mushrooms cooked, onions both raw and cooked. I don't have time to go into actually why to cooking and raw, but basically, the question is, are you eating your G-bombs every day? Do you? Eat your mushrooms and your onions and your seeds and your nuts and your vegetables and your beans every day, right? Now, once you're on a total vegan diet, we have to recognize that you could be suboptimal in certain nutrients, like B12, zinc, and EPA and DHA, which you can get from vegan sources, obviously. So a suboptimal level of zinc is not great for immune system health with aging, because plants have zinc in them, but the phytates bind zinc, so zinc is less absorbable from plants compared to animal products. So taking a little bit of extra zinc reduces risk of pneumonia and cancer in the elderly, and lowers risk of dementia. And the same thing with low levels of omega-3 index, that if it's possible on a plant-based diet to still get dementia if the person is omega-3 fatty acid deficient, because our omega-3 index has a lot of genetic components determining how much long-chain omega-3 that we convert from the short chain that we eat. So people convert at different rates. So some people need more supplements and some people need less or none. But we have to know our omega-3 index to make sure our index is not unfavorably low, because a lower index is linked in more than 12 different studies to show link to brain shrinkage and cognitive impairment with aging. So as we eat a vegan diet, we have to make sure our omega-3 index is adequate. So here's a study of 17 studies analyzed showing those with the highest index were less likely to die, and lower levels associated with higher risk of heart disease and cancer deaths, but were, of course, mostly important, protecting the size of our brains. I'm going to skip over this. I have to wrap this up. So know your omega-3 index. Ideally, it should be greater than 6. And if you're a vegan, you could take a little bit of omega-3 from a vegan source to adjust your omega-3 index in the most favorable range. Here's some references on DHA and dementia. And I'm just wrapping this up now with the last 2 or 3 slides showing that when you eat a standard American diet, you may die 20 years prematurely, but you don't just suddenly die. You just lose mental creativity and cognition and intelligence, and you lose your ability to enjoy your life before you die. You've lost not just 20 years of lifespan, you've lost 30 years of healthy life expectancy or more. When you eat a nutritarian diet, not just living to be around 100 years, between 97 and 107 years old, you're just living longer, but you're keeping your full mental faculties and physical abilities intact, so you have many, many decades of active, enjoyable life. And it gives you more ability to pursue being the best version of you, and having the most positive effects on people you care about, and having more feeling and care for the world at large. You can be the most accomplished, humanitarian, creative, and intelligent, and goodwill to others version of yourself when you keep your mental faculties intact. Because the more you're an addict, and the more you delve into self-destructive behaviors, you get more narcissistically consumed with meeting your own needs, and you're more narcissistically involved with your own body and your own self, and less ability now to be the full, giving, creative, and caring version of you could have been if you took better care of your health. Taking better care of your health is an ethical question here, because you have to be in good health to have a good impact on the world around you and others. You have to be a healthy role model, and you have to be intellectually capable to be the best version of yourself. So you have an obligation to try to be the best version of yourself, to be most useful to others, humanity, and people you care about, and the world at large, because our happiness comes from our ability to relate and feel and care for others, not to be narcissistically involved with meeting our own needs. That does not give us long-term and sustained happiness. Okay, my most recent book is Eat for Life. If you want to start to get more information, to collect data and more motivation, you have to learn the science. You have to be an expert. And of course, I have a retreat in San Diego where people who have a lot of strong food addiction and need help can come and spend a few months with me. The minimum stay is a month. Most people stay around 2 months. Some people stay 3 or 4 months. But we enable people, just like a cocaine addiction center, we enable people to make complete recovery from food addiction, reverse their diabetes, reverse their heart disease, reverse their psoriasis, their chronic headaches, their fatigue, and restore them back to great health again with the tools and education so they can go back and live their life and stay healthy for the rest of their life. Okay, thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fuhrman. I know your main message is related to nutritional science and the nutritarian diet, a diet that's plant-rich and high in nutrients. How does one do that with limited time and limited budget?
Well, actually, putting your health first is a process that makes you more successful in life, happier, healthier, more successful in your career, better able to focus on your family. In other words, don't negate your health when you're talking about being more productive in life and getting more done to accomplish whatever you feel is your passion. Being in good health gives you more ability to wake up excited and refreshed about each day and passionate about living and enjoying life. And it doesn't make life more difficult. It makes life more pleasurable. Life becomes more difficult when you're dysthymic and you're feeling weak and fatigued and lack of excitement about living. So we're talking here about being the best version and healthiest version of you. And that means planning to get enough sleep every night, and planning to do some exercise every day, and planning to get the right food into your body. And sometimes it takes some advanced planning and thinking how you're going to get this done. Now's not the time to tell you all the tips and tricks. But some very, very busy individuals, have some help. They might even hire a person to work 10 hours a week, help them prepare meals. Or they might go out to, a supermarket that has a salad bar. Or they might eat more frozen vegetables. They might buy some prepared salad dressings or sauces to put on a wok vegetable dish. It doesn't take more than 10 minutes a day to make a healthy dinner. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to put some healthy salad dressing on a bowl of vegetables. It's not the amount of time you dedicate towards your health is well worth the effort you put into it. And it's only people who are food addicts with self-destructive behaviors and are looking for rationalizations and excuses that come up with all these reasons that seems that eating healthfully and living healthfully is so difficult. It's not really difficult at all. It's actually easier, more economical, and makes more sense than eating in a way that's self-destructive to your own mental well-being and your own health. So think about the long term here and make the right decisions now, because the decisions you make now is going to affect who you become down the road and the quality of your life in your later years. So these things really matter.
I'm going to add one quick question to you. Is a myth or fact when you eat vegetables or salads, green things, are they raw food or they are just as good as anything else?
It's good to eat a wide variety of plant foods when you're eating a healthy diet. And that means to eat both raw foods and cooked foods. So we want people to eat at least a salad once a day, and even before dinner, eat some raw vegetables with a dip, with a hummus, with a guacamole, with some kind of dressing. And then have your cooked vegetable meals. Maybe a vegetable wok with a Thai curry sauce, with some, with a frozen whipped fruit dessert or something. But the point is that we're eating a mixture of both raw and cooked food and a wide variety of different colorful plants. Our diet is not narrowly focused on one or two foods.
Yeah, once you cook the food, especially the green, all the nutrients are gone.
Well, certain foods are absorbed more readily with cooked foods, and certain nutrients are absorbed more readily with raw foods. That's why we don't really, when we're cooking foods, we're mostly using water-based cooking methods. Like we're wokking, we're steaming, we're blanching, or we're making it a stew or a soup, like a vegetable bean soup, because the water base prevents burning, darkening, browning, caramelizing of the vegetables, which can impair their nutritional quality.
Dr. Fuhrman, you talked about sleep a lot. Can you tell us about your bedtime routine after you eat dinner? You're done eating by about 7. What do you do after that?
That's correct. I recommend stopping eating, trying to eat dinner around 5 o'clock, and finish eating dinner by 6 o'clock. And I go to bed around 10. So that's 4 hours from when I ate dinner to allow the meal to digest fully. So when I'm going to sleep at night, I'm going to sleep on an empty stomach. We heal and repair most effectively during rest and sleep when we're not digesting food simultaneously. A lot of people eat a big meal at bedtime, they eat too much in the evening, they're digesting food half the night, and they're not getting the full benefit in healing and anti-aging phenomena that occurs when you're sleeping. So I recommend that you reduce eating towards the end of the day. And I also think that dessert at night is important because you stop eating before you got full. You stop eating when you had a reasonable amount of food, and then you might have a peach or a couple of figs, or some frozen banana whipped with a few macadamia nuts and real vanilla bean powder, and we have a little bit of dessert to mark the end of eating for the day. So we stop eating, shut down the restaurant, clean your teeth, and engage in recreational and fun activities. Entertainment, going for a hike, playing pickleball, go dancing, sing songs, tell jokes, socialize with people, play cards. In other words, think about all the things you want to do in your life that's fun so you can learn how to recreate without food. The American population doesn't know how to recreate, they just know how to use food as recreation.
Dr. Fuhrman, can you talk to us about your morning routine? What do you do in the first 1 or 2 hours after you wake up?
Oh, nobody ever asked me that. Well, when I wake up, it's cool outside and the sun is not shining bright, so I usually go work in the garden the first 2 hours when I wake up. So when I wake up, I take my dog and I go up and I dig holes, plant trees, fertilize, water, weed, climb the trees and pick the figs or something. So usually I'm out there working in the garden. I use a water meter to see what trees need watering. I make my own compost. I put bacteria that decomposes the compost pile. I measure the temperature of the compost pile. When the compost pile gets below 80, because when I put the bacteria on, it gets very high, like 100 degrees while it's composting. When the compost gets below 80, then I put the red wigglers in, the worms, to decompose it further. So I make my own fertilizer, my own compost. I dig giant donut-shaped wells around the roots of the trees. So I expose just a little bit of the end roots so I can dig down and add the compost around the tree base to allow the tree to get bigger and produce more fruit. So I usually spend the first 2 hours a day gardening, and in the morning, that's when you have the best light, where you don't burn your skin. It's good for your eyes, it's good for your emotions, and it's good to have your hands in the dirt and then working in the earth. So that's what, and then after that, when the sun comes out, then after that, so that's like between 6 and 8, eat breakfast at 8:30 or 8 to 8:30, and then I'm usually going to start to work in the house a little bit.
Last question, since we're almost out of time.
Okay.
If you were Surgeon General, what are the top 3 things that you would want to work on first?
Well, that's a tough question. Well, if I was Surgeon General, I would emphasize to the population that medical care is not the major factor that determines your health. Mm-hmm. It's self-care. That real health care is self-care. And real self-care is lifestyle medicine. And it's really not medicine. It's just lifestyle factors that lead to good health. And of course, we're talking about a primary is diet and exercise and the way we think and how kind we are to others and whether we're motivated by having creative goodwill. So our whole, so we're talking here about making a kinder population that is trying to improve the health, where we're all trying to improve everybody else's health, and we're sharing these pearls that can help people not have heart attacks, not have strokes, not have COVID deaths, not get dementia, and we can win the war on cancer. We spent billions and billions of dollars on trying to throw money at medical research to win the war on cancer, and it's absolutely been a dismal failure. All the time while we have the answers in the field of nutritional science, we could wipe out more than 90% of cancers right now if we gave the population great information from the US government. So I'd be a fighter for people's health and well-being and trying to radically change the way people think about health and nutrition.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Joel Fuhrman, for being with us at Crack the Wellness Code. We're eternally grateful for your wisdom. Thank you so much. Any final message before we close?
Well, my final message, which I didn't speak about too much, is that nutritional excellence is not only prevents serious medical tragedies, it also is powerful medicine to reverse disease. In other words, psoriasis goes away, lupus improves, chronic headaches resolve. We're talking here about high blood pressure, diabetes, people get leg amputations and go blind, and heart disease melts away. We're talking about nutritional excellence is the most effective therapeutic approach to deal with medical problems, not just prevent them. So the bottom message is, don't give up, you can do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Joel Fuhrman.
Thank you. Great to be here. It's always wonderful to have such an enthusiastic audience that are really interested in the message and trying to improve and better their life. And of course, this was a terrific event encompassing a lot of different elements that constitute how to make for a happy and healthy life, and I'm very proud to have been part of it. Thanks for inviting me.